Another thing I was fascinated with this particular piece was the shadow.
I want to start by asking you about the general mise en scène, the whole notion of structuring the work, and how you're working with fragments, a succession of fragments, the way things are repeated, rewound, reinvented.
Realism. Don't you think? I mean, really, you know, the way that life is fragmented and the same conversation repeats so many times in different contexts. The only reason I say that, or the reason I say it, is because I was thinking it as I was watching the play from back there last night, that in an incredibly, beautifully crafted way, the definitive answer has happened 100 years ago, I suppose, with Chekhov. He proved sort of beyond the shadow of a doubt that there's a few conversations and they keep happening over and over. So this is maybe a more frenetic example of it, but to me it's very much in that tradition. I think of it as, for me that's, real, kind of real, as opposed to these beautiful, and I don't say it with anything other than awe, these beautiful artificial constructs like, take your pick, Long Day's Journey, or Death of a Salesman. I mean, they're completely artificial, in the best sense of artifice, crafted to speak to us and convey very specific, or convey kinds of messages. And, so often with what's called the experimental theater, I always find it the realism. It's the realm of realism. To me, maybe I'm weird.
You choose 3 different films, very distinct films. I think, as you say, there are links that can be drawn from each of the films. I'm particularly fascinated, I have to say, by the French film, Le Cercle Rouge. I mean, this is striking to use that kind of a heist film in relation to Dr. Zhivago, and then, one more time, in relation to Terms of Endearment. Talk about those choices.
Zhivago was first, the novel, not the movie.
Right.
Because of its kind of fabulous grandeur, and because of this vast snowy landscape that we imagined was there. Every life, because it was in the midst of a revolution or the move toward it and away from it, every life had its personal dimension as well, but every personal life was also a public life, in that no action existed outside of the societal resonance as well as personal resonance. So they were kind of perfectly matched in that they were antithetical.
There are different ways into this piece, it seems to me.
Yeah.
You can listen just to the voices. You can listen specifically to the audio, to the sound component. You can be watching the screen, the Venetian blind kind of screen. There's the telephones. You can get into the props. Is that part of this layering that you were talking about, this building up of possibility for a production like this?
Yeah, I think so, because I think that if there are things that, I mean, my thought just at the instant you say that is, if there are things that on the surface seem unrelated, and then they start to interact with one another, there's something that transcendent about that. Because our experience is largely prefabricated, like, we know we're here, and but so when something that's an element unrelated, third layer, starts to sing or dance with something that's happening between you and I in this other arena, then we transcend those borders in some way. I mean, some of the humor, I can think of one inspiration for the humor. In the film of Zhivago, when Laura shoots Komarovsky, this man who's in both the novel and the film sort of takes advantage of her and drives her to the edge of insanity, and she shoots him and just grazes his arm. In the film, she shoots him, and everybody in this ballroom goes, ah! and runs in one direction. And then they run in another, and then they all neatly part after Komorowski says, let her go, and she walks out of and it's so overly choreographed, it's so ridiculous and kind of beautifully ridiculous that we plugged into that and just played with that. That the humor is present because it's present in the source materials, I guess, I'd say. And a great deal of what we make, I think, has to do with trying to be honest about what our relationship is to the source material. Like when we see Omar Sharif and Julie Christie and so forth, you know, we're not RSC, so we just sort of represent them the way they appear to us. So humor emerges from that.
So the question is really about narrative and the construction of narrative or the abandonment of narrative, or maybe something in between.
Yeah. What I would say is, in relinquishing the narrative that came with the source material, the Zhivago story, the Cirque Rouge, which is a narrative, hot little tight narrative, Terms of Endearment, which is they're all very distinct, very clear stories. They're really stories. So we broke those open, and so those three stories we let go of. But I guess, you know, to me, what emerges narratively is the places where things from different worlds connect to one another. So story more rises and falls and rises and falls and rises and falls rather than stays a constant. So stories are present, but I don't think a story is present. And then also there's a shift, there's a mood of the piece that's one mood, and it shifts in the course of the piece. So I guess that's a narrative more like the narrative of a large piece of music, which might start with one kind of feeling and resolve ultimately in a different spirit.
I think their reluctance to assimilate comes from a sensibility that has a weariness to it. They make me cringe, like when sick people talk about being sick. Do you feel that way?
I've barely thought about it.
All right, everybody, we're going to do a
If I
line
could move, I
dance.
would
So line up
follow
behind the
the
dancers
light.
in
What
front of
would
you
that
and follow
be?
their lead, all right?
Oh,
Let's
that's
dance.
no more
To
than
the
a
right.
lump of coal in these times.
left.
Changing the political
Now
system,
clap.
that's what really matters.
three, clap.
They are made of stone, workers of the world. They're not
left.
human with all their
Now clap.
disciplined
One,
principles.
two,
I
three,
imagine
clap.
you think he doesn't care about any
Nice
his
job.
daughter. It's not true. I know him. He thinks he is doing this all for us. He wants to return to us a hero, triumphant, wearing a crown of